Hello and welcome to a Building Smart webinar. This webinar is part of the Building Smart Virtual Summit for Spring 2022. Thank you for joining. My name is Sheila Karai-Lum and I will be your moderator today. Today's webinar is titled An Introduction with a Roadmap and Strategy Workshop at the end. Our speakers are Nick Nisbet, Director at AEC3 Limited and Vice Chair for Building Smart UK and Ireland. And also we have Franco, who is Marketing Lead at Building Smart Italy. This webinar is scheduled to last for 2 hours with a short Q&A and a workshop session at the end. The webinar is being recorded and will be made available in the replay section of the event within 24 hours. Before I hand over to our speakers, I would like to remind you that your phone lines will remain muted for the duration of this webinar. If you have any questions or wish to make comments, please use the session-specific chat box in the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. I would also like to bring your attention that Building Smart is committed to ensuring that participation in the development of standards is unrestricted and the process for their adoption is transparent. And standards that are developed do not favour any particular provider and are open, non-binding and accessible to all. Please take note of our antitrust code of conduct, which is up on the screen. And now I will hand over to Nick.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining this Regulatory Room Standard Summit first session. We're going to make some introductions today about what we're doing and who's involved. And when we very much hope to have a discussion about developing the roadmap of how we take the work of the Regulatory Room forward. And we will very grateful to Franco to joining me for this session. Okay.
Thank you very much, Nick, and welcome to everybody.
Okay, cheers. Let me just start by saying something about the role of the Building Smart Regulatory Room. Like all the rooms in the Building Smart community, we are intent on collecting and understanding and responding to industry needs. And each of the rooms that is created and supported by voluntary effort tries to bring together as many voices as possible to make a community, to have discussions, to make reports and assessments of the current situation, and ultimately to make proposals on how standards can support the community better. And that then feeds into the formal part of the Building Smart process, because if we identify a proposal or a standard, we will work through the Standards Committee to formalize those proposals and see them through into the creation of solutions, or certainly the offering of solutions to the industry, which can then be adopted and deployed, and so on. I think the Regulatory Room is quite a unusual room in that its scope is very much client, customer, society facing, whereas many of the other rooms are focused on particular solutions like roads or railways or airports or whatever. And so sometimes we end up doing things slightly differently. But at the heart of it is to think about regulations, requirements, recommendations that come to affect what we build and how we build it. We've been in existence for about 10 years now, and we have a charter, and I'll just run through the 3 or 4 main points of that charter, which we're about to confirm. But our main mission as an aim is to complement the interoperability of built asset information with that attention to regulations, requirements, and recommendations, to be the voice of client and society demands, and so on and so forth. So we want to act as a forum, to be a forum for regulatory bodies to work with the supply side, and the supply side to work with regulatory bodies on research standards development and the development towards automated building code compliance based on open BIM. That's clearly aspirational, and I think a lot of our time is spent looking at the steps towards that goal. What are our means? Well, consideration of related technologies. Not all the technologies exist in the current BIM or information management world, and so we look wider than that. And of course, we want to exchange information and understanding of best practices towards that goal. I should say that although it says automated building code compliance, we are equally interested in other requirements, whether they're infrastructure or whether they're coming from third parties, such as environmental assessments and so on. And out of those aims and means, we want to lead and manage projects and initiatives to facilitate and influence adoption by our stakeholders. That's a summary of our charter. I think it's been fairly, as I say, it's been fairly stable over the time that we've been working, and I think it's a good platform for introducing these discussions. I hope so. Just to look at some of our activities recently, we can divide them into strategic, commercial, and technology. And at the strategic level, we've had two very strong initiatives. One from Franco, led by Franco, on our messaging and our engagement, and he will talk about that in a few moments. And we've had a roadmap based on our charter for about 5 years, which was led by Tommy Hedden. And I think it's we will be revisiting that in the coming year. At a commercial or engagement level, we've had two quite substantial reports which are available from buildingSMART. One on looking at the e-submission process, led by Masako Muto from Japan, which has outlined a series of steps or thresholds which the idea of e-submission can go through between being entirely paper-based through to high levels of automation. And we've also produced a study led by Tamir El-Dirabi from Canada on the business case for automation, which looks at the not so much the financial case, but as the social case, the way that values and benefits can be distributed among all the actors in our industry. And we've continued to look at the technology underlying the regulatory process and the requirements process. We've had a rule interoperability report looking to complement some of the buildingSMART standards for BIM interoperability, built asset information interoperability, with looking at how the rules and requirements can also be shared technically as widely and as useful a way as possible. And we also had a study of some of the application forms from around the world, just to look at the information and metadata and context that regulatory processes bring in to the thing. So at the moment we have two new activities. The first one, really introducing today, is to refresh our roadmap. And when we come to the workshop, I think it'd be interesting to hear views and comments on what and how we should be addressing the challenges. And we have an active project called the Regulatory Information Requirements Project, which is aiming to find common properties, attributes, information demands across the regulatory community around the world to enhance the IFC standard, the property sets, and the buildingSMART data dictionary to try and create as much common definitions and information content to support regulatory processes. And that will be the subject of tomorrow's regulatory room, where we'll look at the details of the project and give you a progress update. This is a moment when I particularly want to thank the steering committee of the regulatory room, Franco, Tamir, Tomi, Casper, Masaki, and particularly Sheila for organizing us. And I should take every opportunity to thank the team for their support. We have a constitution in our charter which follows the buildingSMART room processes, and due process said that we had the opportunity in the last 3 months to have an election to invite new members to join the committee, the steering committee. And I want to thank all the candidates for coming forward. And I want to say how pleased I am that although officially we had 4 vacancies, due to there being a dead heat for 4th place, we are now able to welcome 5 new members to our committee. And let's introduce them on the slide here. I want to congratulate them, and I want to thank them for stepping forward, and of course I want to welcome them. And just to get them on board, remind them that our next meeting is next Tuesday at 2 o'clock British Standard Time, and we will induct them and see how we want to work for the coming year. So I really do want to welcome Rick, Paulina, John, Wawan, and Adrian as the successful candidates. I should also thank those candidates that stepped forward and weren't formally acceptable, and I hope that they will continue their interest in the regulatory room. I don't know if any of them have joined the call today, but I think that extra, they give us a extra worldwide spread and depth, and I think that will help us do more and do it better in the coming years. So a very warm welcome to them. So here we are together, and I think we're lucky and to have such a strong and varied and interesting team. Okay. And just to put it on the map, with not much accuracy, you can see that we have a good worldwide spread. And I think this is one of the strengths of buildingSMART, is that time and time again it finds that it can have this broad international engagement, and not shown on this map is all our friends and supporters from other chapters and other areas. But I think we are getting close to having the kind of global coverage that makes buildingSMART a strong proposition for people to engage with. Okay. I've mentioned that our session tomorrow is about the Regulatory Information Requirements Project, a funded project to extend the IFC. Tommy Henton, who's the project manager, and I will introduce the project, explain it, and update you on progress. I think that this is a really good opportunity to have a direct impact into the international standards and reduce the amount of local work that needs to be carried out. And I think, I hope many of you will join in and also engage with your local regulators to get them interested to understanding what the opportunity is. The session on Thursday is our global activity review. This time we have 3 presentations from Japan, from Portugal, and from Dubai. And we'll follow that up with the presentations, obviously with Q&A, but also a review of how we position various national initiatives. How do we grade them from proofs of concept through to full implementation, from levels of ambition and so on. Because I think there's so much activity around the world that we need to start categorizing some of the efforts in order to see where they fit on our roadmap and on the industry's roadmaps. And in connection with that, I should say that I'm very grateful to Casper, who is helping us set up an internal resource of national activities and so on, so that we can paint better and better pictures of the global situation. So I hope you'll join us for that. So that's an introduction to the regulatory room. I think the strength of our team and the work we've been doing it's down to the individuals, it's down to people getting engaged with the work and bringing their particular skills to our table for the benefit of the international community. What I'd like to do now is invite Franco to just talk a little bit about the messaging that we've been doing to connect the regulatory room to the community.
Thank you, Nick. Okay, let's start talking about a little bit about communication or better engagement. Engagement of different actors in the regulatory arena is in the roadmap of the regulatory room since the beginning. But in 2020, we checked and we considered that this process was not working still. It was not enough. So in that period, we were compared, just to talk about the situation we were facing. We think that we have a sun. We start to think like we were in a planet system where buildingSMART is the sun, but and their open beams are irradiating from the sun to the different planets. And so we were comparing the regulated industry to Jupiter, but it's a big planet, not so close to the sun and a little bit stormy. why we were considering the regulatory bodies like Saturn, that is a little bit obscure, strange planet with a ring around and so on, but was more far away from the sun. So we start thinking about how can we engage them, and the first stuff we have to do if you want to get somebody is to talk with them, and to talk with them we have to find the position of the planets, and so we started some activity. Next, please, Nick. Okay. But we did something. We started a plan for improving our listening capability. So during this couple of years, other than wearing masks, washing hands, and be stuck at home be stuck at home, we started to consider how can we get better to improve our communication with our ecosystem. And honestly speaking, probably the pandemic helped us a little bit, not to, of course, for the personal contacts, for personal links, but specialty but especially because through the net was easier. It was easy to spread the audience. So during in this year, during the Building Start Summit, spring and autumn, we were focused on engagement, on talking with people. And we were so engaged in this that we also promoted a new kind of event, the open house events that falls in summer and winter in the mid from standard summit to the other. That is an open, so a free access virtual event to make the people talk about the situation and invite especially both parts, so the business and the regulatory bodies to talk each other. We enforced our channels, so our BSI forum blog on regulatory is being strengthened. And we also have a direct mail address for your questions, for the question of everybody. We also launched the regulatory room survey that involved more than 160 attendants from 36 countries in the world, and we will from which we will have a report soon about what we gathered during during this activity. The same steering community enlargement is a way to wide strongly our listening capabilities, because now, as Nick showed, we are in more countries looking at more events that are coming and gathering, and also catching more feelings from different parts. And also our roadmap refresh, of course, will help us to continue in this activity. Because, but what really changed in these couple of years, I think, was that we changed our mindset, and we started to think we changed our attitude to include the more people that we can in this process, in the discussion. And one of some of the results we had is an increment in contacts with the chapters. That is a very interesting element in our discussion. Is the focal element in our discussion, and also the recruitment of real project team members. RIR project is the Regulatory Information Requirement project that will be presented tomorrow by Nick and Tommy. Has been a good way to find the new people that was interested in and that can contribute to make us understand how it's working in the discussion, in the debate between regulatory bodies and the building industry. So, Nick, I think that we have no question yet. So, if you go to the next slide, we can just recover some of the questions that we collected from the audience in the last years. And so next one, please. So Is there any question? No, I don't think so. Okay.
Well, let's just say that we really do hope that the audience, any of you who have any challenges or questions for us, put them into the chat.
Yes.
I think we've the need to engage and hear from you is paramount, because a room is a voluntary effort, and just questions can be a very useful stimulus to making sure that we're doing the right things. In the meantime, Franco has challenged us to two key questions. Can it be done? Can we do it? And also, how can it be done?
Yeah.
But if any of the audience have any questions or comments on what we've been doing, please put them up. Otherwise, we'll talk about some of these questions. So, Franco, what do you think we should?
Well, we can just waiting for the question from the audience that we hope will be a lot, will be so many, and please do them. Think that no question is trivial in this space, in this room. We had this very first question from the block of original questions, that is, can we do it or not? The question one was coming from institution: is how achievable is digital regulatory when it is still a minority of construction contractors who are being invested, and when subcontractors will be less likely to be financially invested in digital technology? So
okay, well, obviously, the ideas we're exploring here are would like to make use of BIM as the vehicle for information exchange in the industry. It's always been a challenge, because this is the moment when contractors, design teams and contractors are being asked to share their information models with the public, perhaps, or with the regulatory bodies, or with the client bodies to prove that they're meeting the client's requirements and so on. And so it represents a challenge, and it's probably the most ambitious use case because it's the most exposed. And so, on the other hand, I think there's a huge amount of time and risk associated with the compliance processes. The International Finance Corporation has published reports with the World Bank on how long regulatory processes take in different countries, how many steps there are, what the likely time period is. And in some countries, it can stretch to months. And therefore, it represents a very significant burden, risk, delay, overhead. And so many countries would like to make their economies attractive. They would like to allow their inspectors, their regulators, their supervisors to share their time between checking virtual proposals and checking things on site better. And I think that that as larger projects become available in BIM, then the opportunity for real savings and process improvement grow. And even in those sectors where BIM is unlikely to, or hasn't yet become common practice. I think the idea of a systematic approach to regulation is increasingly attractive because everyone is resource challenged in terms of manpower, in terms of time, and so on. So it's not something that will happen overnight. It's something that is progressively important, and it's important that we get the open standards right, so as not to create proprietary islands or overheads, often for government bodies. Okay.
Okay. You got a question from the audience. I don't know it. Okay, here we go. There is about when a researcher proposes an extension to AFC data model, should they contact a regulatory room or directly the corresponding IR for further validation requirement analysis process?
Oh, well, we are inviting any bodies that have got suggestions to be in touch with the Regulatory Information Requirements Initiative. We have two ways of engaging. We would like funded and committed resources from national bodies and organizations and so on. But we're also very interested in talking to other organizations, such as researchers who may have done the groundwork and may have the information already in a form that we can absorb. So they're both very interested and so on. So the important thing, and we will put a slide up at the end of our session with how to get in touch with us. It's very easy. It's regulatory@buildingsmart.org. And get in touch, and we will find a way of making it work. I think what the Regulatory Information Requirements Project is offering is the chance to consolidate these different local commands and make sure that there is an international view. Good.
Okay. There is another question and a couple of questions from the audience. So that makes us very happy. So, So where do you stand on global CMMS standard and convention? The US tended toward our national CAD standards, but this does not include CMMS requirements. From Kelly Ewald.
Yeah. I think if cost and measurement standards are have traditionally varied between different regions of the globe and within countries and so on. I think that BIM offers the opportunity to focus on the underlying information which is used for applying cost and measurement processes. I think the individual rooms, such as the building room and the infrastructure room, look at these from time to time, and it is interesting that the RICS, although originally based in the UK, is now operating at an international level to try and get more commonality going on. So that's a process which is encouraging. It's sort of in parallel with with our scope of requirements and regulations and recommendations and so on. But I think the transition from national CAD standards towards adoption of buildingSMART international ISO-based standards is actually quite important because it allows the industry to focus on real information from which drafting and other presentations like cost breakdowns and so on can be derived. And that means that some of the isolation that some countries' practices or separation of countries' practices can be eroded. If we can use BIM information, then things like cost reports or measurement reports or regulatory reports or anything can be derived from those, and that's the key opportunity to move away from those document and drawing practices as being the focus of how we work.
Okay. What is great is that in the comments we have also other answers for our questions. So,
Yeah.
For example, Frank Doherty said that I think it was for question 1. It says that in Scotland we find that contractors for larger buildings are using BIM, and it is mandated for public procurement buildings. The challenge is scaling this downwards in a financially realistic way. So,
I think the perception of BIM has perhaps been that it's available and attractive in large projects, and in some cases it's proved very attractive in small cases. Many domestic and residential projects go through. I think there is a middle ground where there is a need for middle-sized organizations doing middle-sized projects to engage, and that is a challenge. But
yeah, I totally agree, because execution of these processes are exactly the real focus point, is the main point to solve. In Italy, we say we have not in Italy, but in Latin, we say de jure e de facto, to say that something is needed by law, and that is de facto is what is needed effectively. And this problem is it's the challenge that we are facing, in my opinion. And what is also Casper showing with his activity of collecting documents is something that is really probably the focal point that we are facing everywhere. More than the question that if we can do it, is the question if how to do that. Okay, there is a question from Olivin. Let's say it's not a question, it's a good topic for discussion. We need machine readable, I think, and interpretable building regulation and codes. Is there an experience out there how to get there? Today we have only regulation on HTML and PDF. No, that's the story, the whole story of how to get off of the PDF.
Yeah, well,
PDF word.
we looked at this in our rule interoperability report, which is probably 5 years old now, 6 years old, and we surveyed the technology, the methods, and so on that are available, because the machine readable interpretable building regulations and codes are it's a challenge. It's a challenge for regulators, because they have to decide if they're going to endorse the machine readable version, or how they're going to handle any suspected divergence between the printed document and the machine readable version. There are technologies that have been deployed to solve this and make sure that any results that come back are as tightly tied to the original text as possible. And I think that's the clue, that people need to know that the results they're getting, or the results that they're being asked to review and sign off, are as closely linked to the written document obviously, technically speaking, we would love regulations to be published as code, but that is not on any legislative agenda that I'm aware of. And so what we have to do is to bring the two things as close as possible together. And in fact, that's the subject of my research work. So, and we've had some successes. We're about to be demonstrating a number of UK building regulations being checked systematically based on the text of the regulations to a far higher degree than ever achieved before. So that is work in progress.
Okay, there are some questions about different regulation in different countries. There is one, I think, that from Paul Burrows is clarifying the discussion. Regulation in different jurisdictions differ quite substantially in form and application. Some are very prescriptive and rigidly applied, whilst others are almost advisory and rely on professional judgment in individual situations. Are there particular challenges supporting these different forms of regulation? I know, Nix, you like very much this question.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's real.
Yeah. Oh, I know that there is a perception that some regulations are subjective. And my experience is that we need to break that down and be careful, because in some cases, we can put all the regulations and requirements on a rainbow spectrum from testing geometry to testing properties to numerical properties, testing text properties or whatever. And I think the subjectivity often comes from people looking at the regulations without understanding the context. So, for example, in the UK, we would look for clear visual distinction between walls and floors in buildings where accessibility is an issue. That's not clearly defined in the regulation, but the best practice is to refer to some British standards and so on. And so what very often subjectivity is actually explained by the context. So we have to take that into account. The other kind of regulation is that there's always been a tension between what we call prescriptive regulation, which may be directly measurable from information models, and performance-based requirements. And I think we need to create ecosystems where some of the performance analysis is done as part of the regulatory process. So, for example, we'll be demonstrating again in the UK automated energy analysis as part of a regulatory process, so that the same BIM model is used for the prescriptive checks, but also the performance-based checks. So I think these things can be joined together. Good. So, and I need to apologize to Kelly because I thought, we were talking about costing and measurement, but maintenance management systems, I didn't address that. Perhaps I should have, but I think certainly we are seeing increased interest in regulation of the buildings in use or infrastructure facilities in use as much as their design and construction. And that is an area where many governments want to bring forward regulations to say how facilities should be managed for the safety of the occupants, for the health of the occupants, and so on and so forth. And I think we can anticipate that there will be more of those kinds of in-use regulations coming up. And again, building models are going to be central to organize the information that answers those questions. Sorry, that was a...
Yeah, but in fact, Kelly, it added something for its question about was about what are you doing for tagging of instruments and equipment standards, and just say Richard Kelly was answering to join the facility management room and to go a little bit in the deep in this aspect, the technical aspects. I don't know, Richard, if Nick, if you want, we can just check which the question that came from our audience in the past, because one is are there any countries, but we already said something about the countries, but just to make to give an highlight about the adoption of IFC in building permit. Do we have something to add to what you already said? Do you have something to add to what you already said?
Well, I think several Nordic countries, including Finland and Estonia, are introducing an expectation that IFC files will be submitted, or to be more specific, to reduce the use of proprietary files and welcome IFC files as part of the submission. And I think worldwide, the presumption in favor of open standards is getting very strong. That government and industry are grasping that the basis of any improved regulatory systems is going to be on the basis of open standards. And I think IFC is recognized as being the best standard available to the industry at the moment. So I think that's it's exciting. We'll hear tomorrow on Thursday about progress in that area.
Okay, there is one more question from Frank Doherty about the problem that we already had some question about this topic in the but we put that question in the block of how to do it. And they say in Scotland we have approved certifiers of design who can certify section of compliance structure, for example, and they are appointed and audited by government. Automated checking software. Could there be a similar model to give regulators confidence in using automated tools?
Yeah, I think the question of acceptance and certification of tools, at the moment we certify professionals to do tasks. I think there is a trend towards saying that even professionals who endorse or give results or provide certificates must support that with evidence. And I think that's where automated compliance checking can help a great deal, because we can generate that body of evidence by applying the rules carefully. And that means that the professional judgment is backed up by evidence. I think if automated compliance is seen to work, then the desire to have certification of the software, well, I think the industry will probably focus on accepting the results rather than certifying the software. I think one of the trends is that rather than having very specific software, that we will move towards having a general rule engines as technology which consume regulations and consume BIM models and give results. And so the question of certifying the software will actually disappear or fade, because what we will be wanting to certify is the representation of the regulation and the representation of the building. So I think the assumption that that every regulation will require specific software which will need to be signed off is actually something that is less challenging than it used to be. We're moving towards the software being the small part of what's needed, and it's the information preparation that's the important part. Tricky.
Yeah, it's a tricky question. My experience in different fields, regulated fields, was that more than a certified software. We were talking about a validated software. That is something that means a software that can be used for in the area you are considering. So, for example, if you are an institution for checking, I don't know, fire activities, features. Fire defense features, but it's hard to find, it's impossible, in my opinion, to create a certification of all the software. Maybe some algorithms could be certified, but it's a long story to talk about, I think, in my opinion. Okay, some other questions? No questions from the old Olivin? No, there is a very good discussion parallel to what we are saying. Nick, I think that we did something, I need something, we need, it's great to have this kind of debates because it creates a lot of the parallel discussion about it. We hope that the next time we will be in presence, so we can also have a beer together talking about this. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Before I go to the next slide, just to close the presentation. Okay.
Yep. Well, yes. On the subject of guidance on automation for regulators, I do recommend you take a look at the e-submissions report that is available, and then that could probably, we could think about turning that into more explicitly guidance for automation and so on. And yeah. And Ovind, yes, thank you. We're working on it. The idea of more generic software, less code, more content based things. And for Paul, I just seen the message: are we working towards a generalized ontology of regulation? I think there are some commonalities that I've started to see across the globe in construction, but also across compliance in other sectors like the finance sector. And that there is a pattern that I can see that that regulators increasingly are looking for three things. One is risk being managed? Is there a process that is going to get a good design? Is there a process that is considering fire safety in active use? And in some sectors, such as construction in Europe, it's the presence of a risk management process that is critical and will keep the regulators happy. Then there is the question of is that process producing a safe building, a safe facility? But I think the third trend is to say, is there information to back up those two claims? So you can claim that you've got risk management going on, effective, right? You can claim that risk management is producing a safe building. But the third thing is, can you support that with information and evidence to back it up? Because, as Frank said, the role of professionals is increasingly being seen as evidence, the comments of professionals, which needs to be backed up at every stage. So yes, let's move on to the second set of questions. If we can, that's right. On
Yes.
how to.
Yes. Okay, this is a question that is a how-to that is related to the previous topics we were discussing. How are you dealing with the liability issue of auto-checking? And this is a question that probably is something we already discussed, I think.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yes. Okay, now the question was, how can we best specify IFC data as a requirement to ensure that the delivery teams delivers correctly, exactly the information for the specific purpose of regulatory approval? And this is something that we probably will discuss tomorrow in the RIR session, also with the relation to ISO 167739. But
yeah. Well, I think the clue here is that the more that we can standardize at an international level, the easier it will be for designers and engineers to prepare their submissions, and easier it'll be for regulators to check it. I think in the manual process, there's often a completeness check before people do the compliance check. If we can automate it, then the definition of what information should be provided is sufficient information to pass the checks, and it becomes much more of a much more robust and trustworthy process. But yes, we've got to tighten up. Well, we have the opportunity to tighten up all sorts of aspects of information delivery using IFC, so that it works better.
Okay, I think we can go slowly to the end, to the last slide, where we have is there any other question you see that is from the audience that we have? There is a question from Oyvind that is Nick, to support that checking software need to be more generic in the future. This goal will define how we digitalize the regulation. Is semantic web technology relevant?
I think there's yes. I mean, I very much believe that we need generic rule engines, generic management engines to manage the process, so that it's acceptable both to the regulators and the designers and engineers and contractors and so on. And I think the role of a semantic web, it's not specifically relevant, but we do, when we think about evidence, we accept drawings as a first layer of evidence, or we accept a BIM model as a first layer of evidence of the intention. We may challenge it. A regulator may challenge whether a particular U value on an element is correct. We may refer, we may then need to refer to manufacturer's data. That can be challenged, and you may need to refer to a standard where or a test certificate or whatever. And I think one of the things the semantic web should do or can do is make that hierarchy of evidence much more accessible. so that the drilling down that people may want to do becomes easier. Yeah. So I do see it as having a significant role. On the other hand, regulators tend to want to sign off a specific package of information, which needs to be effectively archived or stored or referenceable, because it'll be used to check the actual construction process or whatever. So in that situation, we just have to think a moment about the semantic web and whether it actually provides persistent information. So there's a tension there. So
Okay. No news from the audience, so I think that we can close the session. I will thank all the attendants for their very interesting questions and the discussions. And we will invite all the attendants and all the attendants' friends and to make the people they know that are involved in to share your challenge and their challenges, and challenge your boss about the question you are giving us, challenge your customers or regulators if they are involved in. Ask us what you need. No question is trivial for us, and everything is very interesting. Also, at least because it gave us it light up the lamp of interest somewhere else, and then join in to make this question, to contact us or use our channels. The mail is regulatory body regulatory at buildingsmart.org, or you can also chat in the buildingSMART forum. There is a session that is dedicated to regulatory and is attended every day. So please put a question there, post there your question. The address is reported here, and everybody is asking for the beer. So
yeah, well, we are lucky to have a really good community here, and yes, it will be wonderful if we can gather in Montreal in the autumn to get together. But I think, as Franco was saying, we've also learned that to use the open houses between the summits and the summits to make sure that we have that global audience, and are really grateful for people to joining in today. So thank you very much. Thank you, Franco, and to Sheila and the team for putting this together.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, everybody. And for the beer, we're going to Montreal, but for the Prosecco, we're going to Rome in next spring. So
excellent.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.